A quick word about Banned Books Week and censorship. So, Banned Books Week was established back in 1982 in an effort to bring together the entire book community in shared support of the freedom to read. The theme for this year's Banned Books Week is Censorship is So 1984. Read for your rights. With the escalation in attempts to ban books in libraries, schools, and bookstores around the country, George Orwell's cautionary tale 1984 serves as a warning about the dangers of censorship. This year's theme reminds us that the right to read belongs to all of us, that censorship has no place in contemporary society, and that we must defend our rights. So, who challenges books? There you go. So, according to the American Library Association, the majority of book censorship attempts now originate from organized movements. Pressure groups and government entities that include elected officials, board members, and administrators initiated 72% of demands to censor books in school and public libraries. The 120 titles most frequently targeted for censorship during 2024 are all identified on partisan book rating sites, which provide tools for activists to demand the censorship of library books. So where do challenges take place? So as you can tell by this graphic, about 55% at public libraries, 38% at school libraries, 5% at schools, and only 2% at about higher education institutions. Censorship by the numbers. As you can see, there's an alarming rate of book censorship that kind of began at about 2021. It really spiked in 2023. Last year, a little bit lower, but overall, it's still a little bit high when you compare it to about 10 or 15 years ago. So we should be very cognizant of what's going on right now. The top 10 most challenged books since 2024, I'll breeze through these really quickly just in case you could recognize some of them. All Boys Aren't Blue, Gender Queer, The Bluest Eye, The Perks of Being a Wallflower, which, by the way, on this upcoming Thursday here at the library, at 6 p.m. on Thursday, we're going to be doing a movie screening for the movie The Perks of Being a Wallflower because it was based on this banned book as well. Tricks at number 5. Looking for Alaska, Me and Earl and the Dying Girl, Crank, Sold, and finally, Flamer. And again, you all got bookmarks on your seat as well that have these top 10 books listed as well. So thankfully, librarians are not alone in putting up a fight against censorship, and we have some fierce and poetic advocates on the same team. So now please allow me to introduce tonight's special speaker. Lynne Thompson was the 4th poet laureate for the city of Los Angeles. The daughter of Caribbean immigrants, her poetry collections include Beg No Pardon from 2007, winner of the Perugia Press Prize and the Great Lakes Colleges Association's New Writers Award, Start with a Small Guitar, which is on sale today, that came out in 2013 from What's Books Press. Fretwork came out in 2019. That was the winner of the Marsh Hawk Prize Poetry Prize. And her latest publication is Blue on a Blue Palette, which just came out in 2024, and again, that is for sale today. Thompson's honors include the Tucson Festival of Books Literary Award for Poetry, the Stephen Dunn Prize for Poetry, as well as fellowships from the City of Los Angeles, Vermont Studio Center, and the Summer Literary Series in Kenya. Her work has appeared in Plowshares, Poetry, Poem a Day from the Academy of American Poets, New England Review, the Colorado Review, Ecotone, and the Best American Poetry, just to name a few. A lawyer by training, Lynne Thompson sits on the board of the Los Angeles Review of Books and is the current chair of the Board of Trustees at Scripps College, her alma mater. She facilitates private workshops, most recently for Beyond Baroque, the Poetry by the Sea Conference, the Moore Park College Writers Festival, and the Central Coast Writers Conference. Lynne Thompson is a native of Los Angeles, California, where she currently resides. Tonight, Lynne will be joined by one of our very own rock star librarians and LMU favorites, Nicole Murph. So Nicole Murph is a reference and instruction librarian here at LMU. She too is a Los Angeles native and identifies as an Afro-Mexican and former first-generation college student who earned a bachelor's in psychology with a minor in history from right here at Loyola Marymount University, and she went on to earn a master's in history from Cal State Northridge and a master's in library and information science from San Jose State University. Nicole teaches information literacy with a special focus on the arts, humanities, social sciences, and film and television. She's very driven in her advocacy against injustices both on and off campus, all of which inform her role as a teaching librarian. Can you please help me welcome both Lynne Thompson and Nicole Murph?
Thank you, Ray.
That was great. The good news is I'm no longer the chair of the board of Scripps. Thank you, Lord. That's come to an end.
Well, I want to say, first of all, Lynn, thank you very much for taking the time to meet with us, to have this conversation and the poet reading that you're going to provide. So to start things off with our questions.
Sure.
And so,
Can I just say before I do it, what a fabulous library you all have. This is, your dean and I went to undergrad college, and we're a little snotty about Scripps College, and they're beautiful library, very old, tempered glass, etc. But this is pretty good. We don't have a view like this. I just want you all to know how lucky you are.
The mountains, you have the mountains.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we've got Baldy. Okay.
Yeah. So to start things off, what drew you to poetry as your primary form of expression, and how has your relationship with the form evolved over time?
So as a kid, I'm the youngest of 5. I'm an adopted daughter of Caribbean immigrants. I have 4 older brothers. And always was looking for ways to spend time with my dad, and my dad loved poetry. And he wrote poetry. He didn't send it out for publication. He didn't really share it because his wife, my mother, said, "Is there any money in it?" Really, if there's no money in it, I don't know what you're doing. But he loved it, and he read it to me. So this was our time together. He was a big reader and really read poetry. And of course, I started scribbling very horribly. But I guess the way I would say it's evolved over time was it really took root. This idea that you could use language in this beautiful way to convey everything on the planet there is to convey. And so at some point when I was practicing law, I've been practicing not quite 15 years, and I woke up and I said, the thing that's wrong with your life is you're not writing. You're not writing poetry. And I knew I couldn't do it as long as I was a litigator, so I gave that up, found a job, much to my family's horror. My mother was, "Really? What's wrong with you?" One of my brothers said, "Don't you have a novel in you?" Nobody reads poetry, but that's not really true, right?
Right.
They may not read it as much as I do, but I like to say if someone gets married, has a baby, dies, there's something horrible like 9/11 or January 6th, they don't call the novelists, they call the poets, right? So I don't really worry about people not reading poetry, but once I made that decision, I also decided I was not going to go back to school because I had already paid off my law school loans. I wasn't going there again, right? I didn't think I wanted to teach. I ended up teaching. But I really started to study the craft, and that's the way that it's changed. I wanted to know, okay, I'm pretty good with language, but really, how is this working? How do the poems I admire, how they work? So I just threw myself into it in every other non-academic way that I could.
It's probably one of the best ways to learn, and that's something I've realized because I've worked with students. I still do as a librarian, but in my previous role in the arts. And I see students who are, let's say, business majors, because their parents want them to be business majors. And they just come up to me like, I take an art class somehow? And I'm like, you can minor.
Absolutely.
And so, but you see that hunger, and that's what you're reminding me of some of these books where we just have that hunger that needs to be filled, that void that needs to be filled.
I always say, the law fed my brain, but it didn't feed my heart. And that's what I was hungry for.
And just to detour a little bit, you mentioned, because poetry is, like you said, like when it comes to these milestones that happen in our lives, whether personal or collectively, like January 6th. So I was the poet Amanda Gorman comes to mind.
Yes.
And so, because what we've been through at that time, and we're still going through.
Right.
Any thoughts about that pivotal moment in poetry with Amanda Gorman? just capturing a moment that we were experiencing.
Well, I was happy for the listeners because we poets know that poetry has the power to really captivate people. But they don't think about it a lot. But she was so good at her delivery and so up to date. She'd been obviously working on that poem. If someone tells you you're going to be the inauguration poet, you're like freaking out. What am I going to say? But she incorporated that January 6th into her poem, which I thought was brilliant. So that's what poets do. I mean, yes, we write about flowers, the mountains and whatever, but we also very much, whether we consider ourselves political poets or not, it's kind of hard to avoid it because we are political, we are in community with one another, or try to be. It's kind of hard to avoid it.
Well, my next question, and it's about something that it's one of those things we can't avoid, and Ray gave the introduction, book bans. Book bans, censorship, it's not a new thing. It's been ongoing for God knows how long, but it's hitting its peak in the last 10 years. Yes. And so the book bans are happening across country, and like I said, it's been happening. I think some folks have been like, well, I read about that happening in history, historical events, and things like that, but here we are in full-fledged. And so what does it mean to you as a poet to see words, and often poems, restricted and or erased?
I was thinking about that this morning, anticipating our conversation. I thought, I don't know about you guys, but if I know a book is banned, that's the first book I want to read. So I don't think this book ban thing really works the way they think it's going to work. And now that we're living in a time, maybe we always did, but with technology being what it is, you can get hold of that book if it's not in your library. A friend has it, or I was trying to think when I was in high school, at least I wasn't aware of many books that had lesbian characters in it. And so this book comes out, The Group by Mary McCarthy. And the only part anybody really wanted to read was about the lesbians, right? Because we hadn't read that in any of our books, right? High school age books. I don't know where I got my copy, but I sure got a copy, and it was up for the bed, and I was supposed to be reading it, but of course I'm going to read the book because everybody's talking about it, right? So I don't think it really works. For some authors, it's a point of pride, say, this is a damn good book to read, because they don't want anybody to read this book. Of course, it's horrifying that to be raised thinking, a lot of the things we learned in the Constitution didn't apply, but certainly the First Amendment was pretty inviolate. We could say what we wanted, we could read what we wanted. This situation recently with Kimmel is a good example. He's not saying things the current administration likes, so he's out. Of course, money talks, right? So he's back. But the idea that students in particular, those of you who are students in the audience at this institution or anywhere else, or for the rest of us who are lifelong learners, the idea that you would go to your bookstore, and worse yet, your library, and ask for a book, a relatively recent book, we're not talking about maybe something that's 200 years old, and it's been prohibited from being on the shelves, is the beginning of the end to me. Because this is your source of information about things outside of your experience, right? If you want to learn about a religion you don't know anything about, or I'm not sure what AI means, or whatever it is, you go to books. And someone saying, we're going to tell you what you can read, we know that's the slope. I mean, I'm already questioning what's happening to our democracy, but that's certainly taking us on the slope of only being able to read. It's happening with universities. We want you to teach a certain curriculum. We don't want any of that DEI stuff, right? You're prohibiting the students from learning, and they may not agree with what they read, But that's the whole point, is to be exposed to things that you might not otherwise be exposed to. So yeah, I'm horrified. Simple answer.
So am I. Sometimes I teach the screenwriting classes because I talk to the students and I say, yeah, you're gonna write your screenwriting and do your thing, but you're also gonna write other things, books and stuff. And so I'm like, how do you feel if someone censors you in today's day and age? How do you feel someone doesn't want your material to be out there or seen? And I put that in front of the students. And I said, because I talk about book bans, but like, how do you feel about that? And I can just hear, they're just like, personally, how would you feel?
Yeah, it's bad. I mean, you put your blood, sweat, and tears into a story, whether it's a poem or nonfiction. It's a story. It's something you're telling someone else, and someone says, we don't want any language. What was it that the administration did? They took out all references in the tax code, any word that was diverse, diversity, or for some reason attachment. But they did it with AI. So now you're reading the document and it says, where attached, we go blank, your papers. What? Do what? So they had to go back, realizing that they were, because we don't want any of that DEI stuff. I said, what does attached got to do with it? But certainly nothing that said diverse, diversity, any synonym of that.
Well, they had a list of words
They had a list of
with the
words.
grants, like you can't have the word woman or women on it.
What the heck? I wish they would do that and say, no women pay taxes. Excellent. That would be helpful. But yeah, no women, you can't say gay. There's a writer, Roxanne Gay, she says she's screwed. She can't go anywhere and say her name out loud. Yeah, you have these words that you're prohibited from saying, which makes everybody want to say them all the more. It's like telling your children, now you shouldn't use curse words, and you use curse words around them, and they say, damn, and you're shocked. Really? Yeah. That's the way it works.
The silver lining I see in this is that it just has folks to be more rebellious,
Yes.
more creative,
Yeah.
Pushing back and having more courage
Absolutely.
with that. And so I look at these students, run with it, like meet your moment right now. And so
Pick your moment, pick your spot. This is also a great opportunity. I don't think I brought it to read tonight, but to extend your vocabulary. Because there are ways that you can really curse somebody out and they never know what you're saying to them, right? Because you're using some language that's out of date. I wrote a poem that's all, I think there's 16th century words. And the prompt was, don't look them up. So you were using them for their sonics, right? For how they sounded. And the one word I do remember from the poem that's sticking out in my mind is a ganderlooner. I don't know what it is, but my God, that sounds fabulous. And so after I write the poem, I look it up. A ganderlooner is a man, apologies men in the room, who cheats on his wife within the first 2 weeks of marriage. Very specific. I don't know what they call you after the 2 weeks. But in those first 2 weeks, come on, you just got married. A ganderlooner. But you could tell from the sound of it, I ended up using it pretty correctly. Just going but I say that to say, be courageous. If you're writing, composing, filming, whatever the case may be, don't let it stop you that someone may say, we don't want to have that. Because I think you're right. Americans take a lot for granted, but I think recognizing that we're at risk of losing some of our freedoms, most notably the right to read and write what we want, I think there's going to be a lot of rebellion.
well, there's a museum here, and I know we're in Detroit, but it's connected. But there's a museum in Culver City, the Vendy Museum, and I interned there, and I've had the director come for a speaker series. It's a great museum for students to visit because they do talk about, especially right now, and this times they've been devoting their time in exhibitions on censorship and so forth because Cold War.
Yeah.
in East Germany, right? So you have and this is an example, and it happened here in America too, but it's an example where they couldn't obtain directly music or films or books like we could, but that was, a subservient underground access. So what they did and they did an exhibition a few years ago, the album covers. They couldn't directly access the albums like we could, so they would copy these music and then they create their own album covers that signify the music. And some of those covers were a lot better than the originals. So, but the point is the creativity that was involved, because it had to be underground, had to be subservient to give them what they were experiencing. So everyone, it's happened before. And so looking back to that, get creative. Get brave. It's your moment.
Yeah. And this too will pass. I hope I live to see it, but this too will pass.
It will. It will. So with that being said, my next question for you is, what do you hope young women take away from reading your poetry, particularly in the moment when women's control over our own bodies is under attack?
Blue on a blue palette, even though I didn't really plan it this way, when I went back and looked at the poems I had been writing, is a book primarily, not exclusively, but primarily about women's rage, joy, frustration, spirituality, sexuality. And I wanted to explore and talk about all those things when it comes to the life of women, because not just what's happening today, but we know that women's bodies have been under attack for a while. This makes no sense to me. Just logically. And some of one of the comments that was made, I forget where this particular legislator was from. I want to say Missouri or Kansas. It almost doesn't matter, but he said something to the effect, well, a woman who's raped, her body knows that, and she won't get pregnant.
Yeah,
Missouri, right? What? So, there's just so much ridiculousness going on about women generally, about our intelligence, about I think last week, poor generals and admirals who had to come from wherever, we're going to make it male requirements and standards, thank you. Male standards. And there's a meme, I don't know if you've seen it going around, where Hesketh was trying to pull ups on the bar, and he couldn't, and he kept falling off or whatever. And there was a woman, her baby strapped to the front of her. She's just going up and down and up and down. It was probably AI generated, but the point was made that, some of these women, there weren't a lot in this room with the generals and admirals, but I wouldn't want to mess with them. They looked pretty fierce to me. And what one of them was saying was, the standards aren't for men or women. The standards are this: you must lift so much. You must be able to climb over this wall, whatever those are. Whatever you are, man, woman, or whatever. I'm sure there are plenty of men who can't do that, right? So we already have neutral standards. Enough said, but it was those kinds of issues I was thinking about when I put the book together.
When I read your book, the Blue on Blue palette, sorry.
That's okay.
That was, when I read it, I just felt gravitated to because I said she's speaking to not women in general, but the rage.
Yeah.
I've been feeling rage for a long time. So
I tried to balance out a little bit of joy now and then, but there was a lot of rage.
No, it's funny because the stereotype sometimes of librarians, especially the women librarians, are like this little coy behind the desk and everything. Well, we're rage. What are you talking about? So, but that's what gravitated me when I was reading your book, was that, the complexity of our feelings. One day we're full of rage, and the next day we're we are comforting you, we are doing this and that. It kind of reminded me, one of your poems, I was looking right now as you were talking, hold on a moment, bear with me. I got it all tapped up here. And it shall be in that day that living waters shall go out. And I was reading it, and in a way, it reminded me of the song, Billy Joel's song.
Yeah, which one?
I apologize.
That's okay.
Like a woman or something.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
It kind of
It's always a woman to
always
me.
a woman's face, but the idea of like the complexities and like one minute she's this, the next minute she's that, that kind of vibe, and that's what I was getting, from that too. But you were tapping into the ocean, to the nature, to earth, really, and so I do appreciate that, and a lot of that is reflected in your poems in the book, both books actually.
Yeah.
So my next question for you is, what advice do you have for emerging poets who want to use poetry to speak to justice, freedom, and selfhood?
Read everything that you can. Read every poet that you can, but also read broadly. Read things out of your comfort zone. I became a lawyer because I was too dumb to become a doctor. I can't do math, I can't do science, I can't do any of that. At least I don't think I can. So I try to read about that as much as I have a great new book about trees. Fabulous book about trees. So read everything, but especially the really sad thing about the times we're living in is we've been here before. And so if you really want to understand why we are where we are, we were talking about history. You were a history major. I wish I had been a history major. But anyway, my favorite saying is, this is probably paraphrasing Friedrich Hegel, German philosopher, we learn from history, we learn nothing from history. We keep doing the same dumb things over and over again and treating it like it's new. So this young man, Trey Ford, I think Ford was his last name, he hung himself in a tree. What? No, he didn't hang himself in a tree. That is not to say, sadly, people don't take their lives. But it's pretty suspicious that a young black man would hang himself in a tree. Just not by him. So now there's another autopsy, raising questions, etc. We are, and it feels new, right? Because we weren't living then, back 80 years ago. But we keep doing the same things all over the planet, not just in the US, but all over the planet. So I would say read broadly and bring that understanding into your issues on justice. But all you have to do, read the paper, listen to a podcast, look out the window, overhear conversations. I use that a lot. I'm always eavesdropping. People don't think I'm stalking them, but really people say amazing things, right? The fodder is out there, but what's going to make your poems richer is really understanding we have been here before. Horribly, shockingly.
You're not stalking. And so Octavia Butler took public transportation, everything, and all her story ideas, people was from the folks she was encountering and listening to and so forth. So the richness
The richness
of it.
It's good when people in my family look at me and they say, "Are you writing a poem?" I said, "You don't know, right? You got that look on your face." Then they'll say, "Are you writing about me?"
Okay, so I have time for one more question. So I do want to ask, how do you hope your journey from the daughter of immigrants to a labor attorney to the poet laureate inspires others navigating their own complex identities?
I want to say to the students in particular, but to everybody, unlike what I thought coming up, you don't have to be one thing in your life. You can wake up one day and say, "Gee, I think I want to be a potter." Now, be practical about it. You don't want to be a potter up under the freeway, I don't think. You're probably going to have to keep your job, but there are ways around it. And I think I had a father who I adored who worked at Lockheed Aircraft Company all his life, 30 years, 35 years. But he had this poet in him, and when he retired, he wanted to do that. I didn't want to wait that long. I wanted to figure out how can I do this and pay the bills. And I may do this for a while and then decide, I probably can't climb Mount Everest. That probably is not going to happen. But, maybe I'll be a cook. During the pandemic, I really got into cooking. Maybe I'll be a cook. Maybe I'll just have a little truck. Maybe I'll just have somebody over, right? But you can do those things that seem less practical. Or conversely, you can be a poet and suddenly decide, I'm really interested in the law or economics or whatever the case may be. Either way, right? Make sure that what you're doing is something that you're happy doing. And if you're not happy doing it, start thinking about what would make you happy. Because you're going to have a life that's this long. It feels long, but it's not long, right? You don't want to spend it doing something you don't want to do. So I think that's what I always say to people is just go for it. Just go for it.
I tell that to students who are touring the campus perspective and they're just still grappling with what I'm going to major in, and I'm like, do what you love. You may not feel it now, but you will.
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly right.
So thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you.
We look forward
Wonderful
to
questions.
Thank you. We look forward to you reading the poems. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ray.
Thank you, Nicole. I was about to say, before we transition into a poetry reading, can we express our appreciation for Nicole Murph?
Yes.
Right now, Lynn, the floor is yours.
All right. Okay. So one of the things when I was thinking about banned books is that I think one of the things that's happening now is people are starting to ban themselves, not write about topics, particularly if they're thinking about sending them out for publication or reading them somewhere. Well, maybe I shouldn't read that, or maybe I should write about something else. No, write about that thing. Keeping in mind, you don't never have to show it to anybody. Right? There are poems that I've never shown to anyone. So I decided to pick out a few poems that were hard for me to write, either hard for me to write. Usually that's not the hard part. The question is, are you going to read it to someone, right? So this first one is from my first book, Beg No Pardon. Keep in mind when you're listening to it, I'm an adoptee. This is Pamela, who was me before I was Lynne, talking to Lynne. She, named Pamela at birth, speaks to me, says, you think you know who you are. You do not. You think everything's great in your gravy train life. Your feet up on the tabaret, sipping fingers of Pernod and blowing smoky O's of Gauloise like you were born to it. You were not. You were born at County Gen, the random upshot of a collision between an urgent virgin, a married man, and the back seat of a Studebaker, though everyone knows there was no joy the night you got made. You came into this world on cotton rough from 10,000 washings. The doc showed up late, then spilled a little Maxwell House on the sheets. The nurses yawned. Mama cried for you for 16 hours before her water broke, and she's been in labor for you all her life. But no one came. No one came to see. So, in time, Mama just gave you away. Of course, you don't remember that, just like you don't remember me. Me, who never got the pretty dresses, never got the vacations at the beach, never sat down with the family to eat lamb and mint jelly on a sunny Easter day. No, you don't remember me. It's as though you were born to the manor, born to speak lousy French and read Edwardian novels in a hothouse, to gad about at high-toned schools, to raise your finger just so. so the ruby shines. But you don't know who you really are, Miss Don't Remind Me, Miss Given Away 4 times until you were taken for good. Well, you got my blood in your veins, and you ain't no fancy dancer. You ain't no pearls and piety. You ain't no seashell by the seashore, and you sure ain't no evening out at Lincoln Center. You got me in your veins, got my chipped white fence, my regular job, my $39 a night room in Vegas, and this name that ain't gonna be at the end of any poem. But don't worry, my sister, my slip of a pen. I'll never let you forget. The night you were born, my name was all you had. So I was very nervous to read that because I didn't think anybody would understand it. And people came up to me and said, of course we understand, my God. And we were talking about words. There's a word in here I never thought I'd use in a poem. Optimist's Requiem. Foolish fool, foolproof fool, queen of foolhardy fools, fool for the long, foolish haul. Although mama didn't raise no fools isn't part of my lexicon, and having a lexicon is one reason I'm such a fool. I've been fooled 59 times and never fooled a single soul. I've been a fast car fool, a fool for fool's gold, an American fool, and I've volunteered everywhere that needs one. Seems I'm not interested in anything else. I think I want fool etched on my forehead. Was a time when being a fool was a slip I could have slipped out of, but that was 40 slips ago. Now fool is tattooed on my tattoos, and I sit at the dinner table eating beans and more beans. A farting fool, that's me. I won't think of desire or anything that might turn me optimistic. It's not going to happen. I'll forget how buttons button, get the cancer and die and still be thinking, maybe, did you see that? Did it look like love? So my mother would be horrified if she knew I'd said farting. And this is one, I don't think, I wrote this after my mother passed, and I'm not sure I might have written it, but I wouldn't have read it. Mother Taught Me Ugly. It's for my nieces, Christine and Sachi. Mother taught me ugly every morning when she'd wake us up and untangle our slim brown legs, nightly knitted into coverlets while we slept under covers of dark. Yawning, we'd stumble, fall into the bathroom, share, shower, half brush teeth, scramble for scrambled eggs and bacon, dress uniformly, shorts, t-shirts, open-toe sandals, then march into her for the braiding of little girl's hair. Mother always began the ceremony with them, one after the other, then vice versa, every other day. The one with green eyes had 1,000 loose, soft curls and took more time, but Mother didn't mind and always sang, "Steal away," for the first 40 minutes, brushing then ending by binding the 2-butt-long braids together at their bottoms with tri-colored ribbons kept in an old cigarette box. After, you could still see the chaotic ringlets burst merrily from those braids, flapping about like the tails of friendly mermaids. The other one had dark eyes, black as Chinese pools where monks are said to mine for secrets. She had no curls, but Mother didn't mind, just worked rhythmically for 60 minutes to weave waves into arrow-straight hair, then tied it with white silk threads, whistling softly to herself while running pod-shaped combs through the strands like she was unfurling gypsy fans. After, you could still see that hair reflecting shine like the shine of enamel boxes atop an antique table on Mother's side of the bed. Finally, she didn't waste any time with me, sing or whistle, briskly untangled, brushed, spit down the nappy strays, 10 minutes top. Then we all went, out we all went, happy and free, if only for one summer of innocent play, Mother's lovely grandgirls and me. We all have pivotal years in our lives. The first one that I really remember, John F. Kennedy's assassination notwithstanding, was 1968. In 1968, my parents were still Negroes. Even when Lyndon Baines signed the Civil Rights Act, my parents were still Negroes who would never mourn for Malcolm X the way they would mourn for Dr. King. They were still Negroes because, despite My Lai, their son was career military. Despite the Prague Spring, they still watched Wagon Train and could ID every has-been on What's My Line. In 1968, a minor pop star, Frankie Lyman, overdosed, heroin. But my parents were still Negroes in love with Nat King Cole and NBC. While nerve gas leaked near Skull Valley, did my folks know people freed themselves? In Mauritius, in Fond Nat, there was a massacre, but Rowan and Martin kept on laughing. I graduated high school the year Sirhan killed Bobby, but my parents were still Negroes when I left for college, knowing 3 students were killed in an all-white bowling alley, South Carolina. But a space odyssey premiered. Hair debuted on Broadway, and my parents, Orthodox Negroes, didn't get the Beatles or why students were rioting in Paris. They were cheered by a Manchester team winning the European Cup, but remained mute when Pope Paul VI condemned a little white pill. My parents were still Negroes that August, but watched Chicago's convention in horror. Jerry Rubin, The Guard, the Democrats and Daley, all the world reading his lips. You Jews, sons of bitches, motherfuckers, go home. Still, my parents were Negroes because they were no longer niggers. Because my daddy drove a long black Cadillac and we lived on a cedar-lined street right next to a white man from Georgia. White South Africans excluded the Marylebone Cricket Club just as women protested Miss America. When the Irish troubles got worse and the 19th Olympiad coal-cocked Mexico City, my parents didn't feel less Negro because John Carlos, head bowed, raised his fist. But I did. The Rodney riots rocked Jamaica. The Queen of Soul won respect. At Yale, women enrolled, and Miss Chisholm got the votes. In 1968, my parents were still Negroes. They never would be again. Okay. All right, I'm not going to read as many as I thought I would from this book, but did want to read this because one of the questions that Nicole didn't ask me that she had on her list was to talk about a poem that I felt I had to write. And I read an article that said that women over 50, and you won't be surprised that I'm over 50, that women over 50, basically don't have any libido, they're not interested in sex, they're grandmothers, they're knitting, they're crocheting, and I thought, I don't know what women you're talking about. Because the women that I know, I'm just saying, couple that with going into the supermarket, picking up my oranges and minding my business, and seeing a couple come out, an older couple, I'll say, 50s, 60s, come out from where I know there's a bathroom, looking very happy. I'm a poet. I put the two things together. Among peaches. Excuse the language, but it's important here. I don't care that I'm old. I still want to fuck, and I don't mean some old lady make love as though I need a doily to perch my ass on. I want to fuck with fury and sweat rolling down the legs of us both. The mixture and emollient for brittle bones. And if my love dog is as old as I am, I don't want him to show it or to complain or say we have to wait for the Viagra to kick in for desire to erect his nipples. I want him to be struck by a sudden urge. If I haven't been struck first, then take me in the stockroom of Pavilion's Market. I want to be so surprised that when I reach out, I bring down a whole crate of peaches. I want to bite his lip to keep him from screaming his pleasure upon seeing my salt and pepper nest. I want him to drink the joy I've daubed on just below my breasts, just in case, and I want him to let me put my mouth everywhere and do what I declined to do in my youth and twice. I need a nocturne to turn me around, that won't turn me loose, to bring me to the hard edge. And when the stock boy comes on us, his arms full with boxes, the latest shipment of sweet fruit, and he can't decide if he wants to take photos to post on Instagram or to run away in terror, I will tell him, pray you get this lucky in years that will slip off and bruise you the way peaches bruise. Yeah, that was, ooh, can I read?
Thank you.
But, you know, they needed to know.
Would your mother blush?
Oh my God, my mother, it just, oh my God. Seeking Paradise. Don't tell me how I came to be born by a river. Instead, won't you bring me honeysuckle and applause of Mexican marigolds? Tell me how Stardust bequeaths its anthems and will not die, so you can bring me a rabanado de cielo that stopped its weeping. Tell me Sam Cooke had it right, singing a change is gonna come, but do not tell me about a child who crossed the Rio Grande to taste U.S., but who's been lost to her mother, doesn't know when she will eat again. Don't you know this girl will remember and then, without warning, kill you as you sleep between your twisted sheets? I wish you would bring us jalapenos baked into sweet cornbread, and with it some green tomatoes, capers, a subtle casamadero. Won't you bring us memories of a dog, a ball, or all of Saturday to do what children want Saturday to do? Why can't you be kind? Why won't you in paradise, us? And I'm flipping through here because I just want to read a couple more. Okay, so I'm going to just read two more. This poem is for Sandra Bland. Some of you may remember Miss Bland was going from Ohio, I believe, to a new job in Texas, driving down the highway, failed to put on her turn signal. Police officer pulled her over, took her to jail, and she committed suicide 2 days later. I have never believed that woman committed suicide. Boquetto for Sandra Bland. I won't stop. Even if a cop appears from perdition in a place he has no reason to be, even if he slams me against the sidewalk or with the butt of his gun and tells me I am under arrest, but not why. Even if he looks both gleeful and hateful as he asks to see my ID, then throws me into, no one will ever find her here. Even if he drags me along the ground until my flesh becomes gravel road, then tosses me into the back seat of a black and white, then delivers me to a sergeant who orders a mugshot that will make me look wasted. I am not wasted. And even if, after days of being forgotten in a jail cell smelling of piss and vomit, My bladder full of fear, I am taken before someone who someone says has the right to judge me, who asks, how do you plead? I will concede that I am only guilty of practicing boketo, the Japanese art of gazing into the distance with no thought of anything specific, while black. And I'll close with this one. It has an epigraph by W.E.B. Du Bois. Would America have been America without her Negro people? Once we were rivers, but is this the last of us? Gone the mean barracoon, gone the deep, wide rivers of us. No more roosters or pickled pig's feet, no Aretha or respect. Is this the last of us? Our African less African and gone? Our tap less Bojangles, Hines, and gone? Gone the deep, wide rivers of us, and gone too our faith and fidelity to the Betsy Ross stitch. And Martin, was he the last of us? And Malcolm, Harriet, Robert Jordan, all gone. Who remains to pray for the deep, wide rivers of us? Gone our song and its shadow. Gone the tongue of the Gullah. Gone the deep, wide rivers of us. Is this the last of us? You can't really believe that. You've been seeing the last of us for a long time come. Come first the black women and their people, Amina of Zaria, Anna D'Souza Nzinga, Nandi. Then come the transatlantic traders sailing from Luanda, Malembo, Sierra Leone, landing Grenada, St. Vincent, St. Kitts, landing the Carolinas, Virginia, New York. Come then the black men, running. Too many slave named like my great-great-great-grandfather George, Fred Douglass. This is not too old a story. C. Emmett Till, Harry Moore, 4 dead girls in an Alabama church. Some say only a few bad rogues, but today's cops, just like yesterday's patty rollers, shot Stephon Clark, shot Danny Ray Thomas, shot Antoine Rose II, shot Deontay Yarber. All of them unarmed. And all of this in the same year of whose Lord? So we fight. We fight for the last of us, even fight each other. Ali Boumier! But then we hear the kora, the talking drum, the balafon and marimba. And Josephine Baker heard them, and Jacob Lawrence heard them, and Toni Morrison heard them, and Jesse Owens, running, heard the drums that turned the Arthur Ashe racket into a drum, the diplomacy of Ralph Bunche into a drum, the demand of Ida B. Wells into a drum, like Basquiat's obnoxious liberals was a drum, like Harriet Powers' quilting was a drum, like a LeBron James dunk is a drum, and didn't Father Curry preach in the Church of England like a drum those lords and ladies had never heard before? So they know, as you know, there will never be a last of us. See, e.g., the Justins of Tennessee. We come like rivers. Thank you. So I'm happy to take questions.
I'll let you choose if you want to be up on the podium.
I can be at the podium so they can hear me, and then maybe people can pass through that.
Hi, I'm Francis. I'm a junior here at LMU.
Hi, Francis.
And so I'm the vice president of the poetry club on campus. And I want to ask you a question because the past 3 semesters, it's been pretty brutal in terms of attendance. And I don't know, there's a lot of factors going into it, right? You have like rising anti-intellectualism, you have AI, and it seems like the arts, particularly poetry, are things that a lot of people just look at and are like, ugh, you write poetry? Like, that's weird. And so it's really disheartening sometimes when we go to our meetings and we only have maybe 4 or 5 students. And I mean, we do it for them and we do it for the art, but just how do you see poetry surviving this rush of all these forces, I guess?
It's tough, and maybe it will help you to know that I've given readings with one person in the room. And it was supposed to be like this, right? So it can be disheartening, but like I said earlier, people want, you know how your body sometimes says spinach? You know, it just craves whatever the vitamins are in spinach. People crave poetry, and they don't even know it until they hear it. So if the 4 or 5 of you take it out into the world and you reach 2 or 3 or 4 people, they're going to reach someone else. It can be very difficult, and I'm very serious when I say I have read one person. I had a friend who owned a bookstore, and she thought, we went to high school. I invited all my high school friends. Did they come? No. I read to her and her sales clerk. It's frustrating, but you keep doing it because you can't help it. And someone will listen.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oftentimes with artists do various crafts, they're often told when it comes to pursuing what they love to monetize off of it. And sometimes I think we can even endure this as like undergraduate students when it comes to like the workforce and like thinking post-grad, right? To be employed doing something we love, but when does that become hindered by like the corruption of capitalism, or like when, if you've ever experienced your craft or love being corrupted, and how do you deal with that, or how do you help avoid for that to not happen through monetization?
Well, first of all, in poetry, there's very little money. It's not like a novel. When my first book came out, one of my brothers said, so like, are you gonna quit your job? Guys, let me try to explain it to you. If Stephen King writes a book, off the top they do around 250,000 books, right? I said, 1,000 books for a poet is a big damn deal, right? So it's not about the money. But that said, we do live in a capitalist society, for the moment. And I think you have to work to avoid that. One thing that I have noticed and that I'm very happy about is when I left my legal community behind, who also thought I was crazy, and found my peeps, as I like to say, in the poetry community, we really support one another. It's similar to your class with the 4 or 5 of you, right? This is your group that you go to for support, to tell you, you know, maybe this is a bad road, or maybe this is a good road, or try this, or whatever. And they will help you through those important questions that you're trying to answer. But sometimes you'll be just on an island by yourself, and you're just gonna have to listen to your head and heart and say, is this really what I'm doing this for? Is this where I'm painting or dancing or doing sculpture or any of the creative arts? You're not doing poetry for the money. I can think of one poet, and I think he had family money. W.S. Merwin, I think he had some kind of family money. Poets teach or something, but they do not make money from poetry. I mean, you can win a prize. I mean, that's why my brother was saying this, because the first book won a $1,000 prize. I was thrilled, but that pays like, okay, one bill, you know. I mean, no, you're not quitting over that, right? So I don't have to really worry about that as a poet. But it is a question when someone wants to co-opt your poetry. I think what's happening at the Kennedy Center is instructive. He wants a kind of poetry that I would never write. I'll put it that way. But I did not read to you the poem that I'm thinking of putting in my next book that's specifically about July 4th. but it wouldn't be something I think that would get into the presidential files. You have to ask yourself those questions. Did that help?
Yes,
Yeah, okay. Yes.
Hi, I'm Lisa. I'm a senior journalism major.
Hi, Lisa.
I'm artistic, and I started writing poetry last year a little bit more. But a question that I always have had since I started writing poetry is that I started writing poetry when I was going through a tough time, and now I'm doing better, and I'm not writing as much poetry, which is just a thing as like an artist. Sometimes pain creates some of the best art, but I really like
So does joy.
poetry.
So does joy.
Yeah, I guess that's my question. I haven't experienced writing as much poetry through joy, and I guess it's a little bit sad to think that certain forms of art only come from pain. And I know that that's an argument that people sometimes say, oh, the best art comes from pain. But I don't think that's the case. But unfortunately, it's been my experience so far with poetry. What would you say to people that say that?
Poetry comes from everything in life. Joy and pain, being a parent, not being a parent, your school mates, your job, the climate. I'm going to recommend for you, if you're curious, go to the library, this gorgeous library, and find a poet, Charles Harper Webb. He's local. He taught for years at Cal State Long Beach, and he is hysterical, absolutely hysterical. Find him and another poet who actually is a friend of his, Ron Kurtge, Koertge, Koertge. They're both very funny. They're both very funny. And, you know, if you want to continue writing, find some reason to purposely write something joyful. Something joyful. I had a friend, he's passed now, but he was an African-American man, and he decided that he was sick and tired of hearing about the tragic black men who are always so mad and pissed off about everything. And he purposely pursued joy, and he had a project called the Black Man of Happiness. And the point of the project was to talk about the times when black men are joyful. And so we were doing a reading together, and he had this praise song. And I realized I had never written a praise song, so I wrote one for him. So force yourself. It could be the smallest thing. Boy, this was the best meal I ever had. Or I had such a good time last night. Why was that? Because poems don't, I think people think poems have to be Shakespeare. They don't. He's a good one to follow if you're going to follow somebody, but they don't have to be that. We're not always talking about wars. So, try to find one or both of those authors.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. I appreciate your vulnerability and your honesty
Thank you.
and your courage and your feistiness. My
Core
question,
brothers. I had advice.
there you go.
Yeah.
My question is, what is poetry in the age of hip hop?
Poetry is going back to its roots. Poetry was originally, we assume we always had books. You guys are smart, we didn't always have books, right? Poetry was an oral art. The troubadours would go marching and the griots would go through town and they'd keep repeating the same things over and over. And that's how people started to remember them, right? But that was long before Gutenberg came up with this great printing press. To me, hip hop is going back, the best of it. I'm not saying I like all of it. There's some that I question. But the best of it, it's going back to those oral roots, if you really listen to it. And poetry is about music, right? My theory is, and I didn't originate this is what I learned from other poets, it's the music of the line.
Yeah.
When I'm writing a poem, it's not done till I read it out loud. And if the music isn't in the line, I gotta go back and fix it. It's all about music, rhythm, the drum, the basic beat of the heart, the drum, right? So for me, I'm not a hip hop artist, but I can appreciate it as something that goes back to our traditional roots in poetry.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Hi, my name is Clark Hamilton. I'm a senior studio arts major, and
Congratulations.
I primarily work in ceramics, so it's a little bit different from poetry in that it uses a different language. But I think as artists, we all kind of speak the same. But I wanted to ask kind of a simple question of like, through all of this, what grounds you in your work?
That's an interesting question. Nobody's ever asked me what grounds me in my work. I love language. I love puzzles. And I love how poems are constructed. I love the poems the most that I know took a lot of work and you can't see it. I think when I really made up my decision, I'm going to pursue this. I was in a bookstore, I don't have Dutton's bookstore anymore, but I was in Dutton's and took down a book of, if you don't read anything else, read this book. Pablo Neruda's 100 Love Songs and a Poem of Despair. And I remember opening it and thinking, like they said in that movie, I'll have what he's having. Oh, good God. I just was blown away. And I didn't really know a lot about poetry and structure and all that. I just knew it jumped off the page at me and I thought, good grief, I want to do that, right? So I think what really grounds me, people say, do you have writer's block? I don't believe in writer's block. Because if I'm not writing my own poem, I'm literally writing out someone else's poem so I can see how they did it, right? So I don't believe in writer's block. I'm too old to have writer's block. I got things to do, places to go. There's not enough time for me to write all the things I want to write. They're in here, they just haven't gotten in the computer yet. But I think that's what grounds me, is just I read it all the time and think, what do you think you're doing, Lynne Thompson? You know, and that's always great when you find a poem or a poet that really turns you on.
I have time for one more question.
I've always been intrigued by process. She makes fun of me for that, but
Process is the best.
Can you speak to the process you use when you're approaching a topic, and like how do you decide when the rhythm's right, when the drum's beating the way you want it to?
It's changed over time, so I assume it'll change again at some point. But now I do compose on the computer sometimes. I was a legal secretary before I was a lawyer, so I'm pretty fast. But what I found works better is to let the poem tell me what it wants to be. So I write in my journal margin to margin. And then I go back and say, does it want to be couplets? Does it want to be tercets? Maybe it's a prose poem. What is this poem saying it wants to do? And it might go through several iterations. I usually keep all the versions. Sometimes I end up going back to the first version. But yeah, I write it that way so I don't have a preconceived notion about the form and the structure on the page. So I'm thinking about this idea and I'm just writing it out. Some of that will come out, much of it will stay in, but I don't know how it's going to look on the page. I'm just capturing the idea and the words and the thoughts.
How do you know when it's finished?
It's never finished. I will just say this one thing in closing. This is a fun story. Fellow Los Angeles poet, well-known, teaches at SC, David St. John. David is introducing the poet Galway Cornell. Galway has won a Pulitzer Prize. He's famous, he's wonderful, everybody loves Galway. Nice guy. David's introduced him, he goes backstage. Galway is writing in the book that won the Pulitzer Prize. He says, what are you doing? They're thinking you're coming out on stage. He said, this poem never worked. What? saying it's a living thing, right? It's your poem. I have changed poems in readings and stuff. I know what it says in the book, but it's not really the best, right? Many poets will say, yeah, they're done because I don't feel like going back to them, but they're not.
I have a quick follow-up question.
I noticed that you have a couple of poems that are saying, like the red dress poems. You have the red dress poem revisited or something. Can you say a little bit about?
I have time for this one
Just
story.
one more, because I noticed that you do kind of come back to a topic or a poem again.
So artists in the room, be you ceramicists, musicians, whatever you are, you're going to create something, right? You're going to be nervous about it, especially if it's your first that you're sending somewhere, right? So I send this first manuscript, beg no pardon, off. That was not the title. The title I had, she said it made no sense, so we won't go there. But she got to this poem, The Red Dress, and she said, I think you're really overstating it. Take out this stanza, flip these two stanzas, and get rid of the coda. And I didn't have enough courage. She's a publisher. I'm just a little lowly poet, first book. I don't know anything, right? So I decided to go with that. But because I am feisty, this gentleman in the back said I was feisty, because I'm basically feisty. I decided that I would go to readings. You get a new book, you do a lot of readings. I would go to readings, and I wouldn't tell the audience, and I would read both versions. And I would ask the audience which one they preferred. I was right. So when it came to the second book, so in the first book, it's Elegy for the Red Dress. In the second book, it's the last elegy for the red dress. Everything is put back in, the stanzas are back the way they were supposed to be. So sometimes it's hard to trust yourself, and that's fine. But when you get that trust, you can do what you did before over again. Right? Thank you, everyone. This has been so much